That was the first time I was aware of the existence of James Brown. It was 1964. I'm a kid in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I see in the newspaper there's going to be this rock and roll movie down at the Lincoln Theater. Got the Rolling Stones, Chuck Berry, and the Beach Boys, so boom, I'm there. But the thing I remember most to this day was James Brown. When I did the Sly video, I was talking about there wouldn't be a Prince if there wasn't a Sly Stone, which is not really true. I've thought about it, and other people have said that, but there would have been a Prince. He just would have sounded different. And there would have been a Sly Stone without James Brown, you know, because that kind of talent's going to come out no matter what. But he would have sounded different because everybody was influenced by James Brown one degree or another. I mean, Michael Jackson. Listen to Michael tell the Godfather himself how much he meant to him in this clip.
Nobody has influenced me more than this man right here. Since I was a child, at 6 years old, he was the one that I looked up to more than any other entertainer. I'm deeply honored to present to James Brown this year's Lifetime Achievement Award, and nobody deserves it more than this man.
Not only that, you can see what Michael was talking about in the audition tape that got them their contract with Motown. Check out his moves. And then when they're on the Ed Sullivan Show, Michael's doing James Brown moves. He's like 9, 10 years old, you know. A little bit younger than I was when I saw the T.A.M.I show. The Godfather of Soul, the hardest working man in show business. Soul Brother #1. You know, that hardest working man in show business, you think that applies to the performances, and it does, but it also applies to just his work ethic in general. Because he did like 300 gigs a year. 300 plus. He was always on the road. And some of those gigs had multiple shows a day. When they're at the Apollo Theater, they did 10 shows a day when he was in his heyday. I mean, can you imagine? He had to have an intravenous drip to replace the fluids he lost. Because, you know, some of his act was an act. The Cape Act was great. Everybody loved that. But the puddle of sweat on the floor wasn't fake. He put it all out there. And when he performed, he worked. And he was like highly competitive, and he was going to show everybody who Soul Brother #1 was. And it's like, you know, hard to miss it. But to keep doing that, what he had to do is he had to keep cranking out records. And at that time, the R&B market and even the pop record market was really based on singles. Album-oriented stuff didn't come till later, toward the end of the 60s. And James Brown's label, King Records, was run by a guy named Sid Nathan, who didn't even believe in albums. They said, albums, now singles is where it's at. And he had King Records set up in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was an independent label, and they were so independent that they pressed their own records on the premises. He had a recording studio and a pressing plant. You could go into King Studios, record a song in the morning, and walk out in the afternoon with a box full of 45s under your arm. So it was a good setup for that. But you had to keep the songs coming to stay on the road, to keep the gigs going. You're only as good as your last song. And singles they got a shelf life of, depending, and they're not all going to be hits anyway, right? They weren't. I mean, James had a pretty good batting average, but it was like, 300 is considered a batting average in baseball. That means that the guy, 7 out of 10 times the guy missed, right? It's kind of like that with, there's a collection, I think there's 9-volume CD collection of all of James Brown's singles. So he got into this thing, they're always on the road. He got into this thing of not waiting until, it's not a thing like the tour, the 1981 tour I was on with the Jacksons. That was like, okay, 3 months and then it's done. He's just on the road all the time. Just a strings of one-nighters. Sometimes they're driving like 700 miles to get to the next gig. But he'd schedule studio time in between gigs. So they'd be like, not have any sleep, they get on the road, and they'd stop in Cincinnati if they were anywhere close to it because he could use that studio. And that's what happened with Cold Sweat. He'd had the idea in his head, and I'll let Pee Wee Ellis tell that story. Pee Wee was his musical director at the time.
After a gig somewhere, James Brown called me in his dressing room, which he often does after the show, and said, I got an idea. And he's, write this down. I had to find some paper.
And Cold Sweat got 2.
So I started putting notation to his grunts. It just came out of the bass line to Cold Sweat. I don't care!
But they tell a story about how while they're setting up the mics, the band is practicing the groove because Pee Wee wrote down that bass line so James wouldn't forget it. So James showed the bass player the bass line, and then Clyde Stubblefield comes up with that Cold Sweat groove.
Well, like that tune, I just got in the studio myself in the booth and started playing this riff. And Pee Wee and the bass players came in with me. So this is the way I. I was just sitting in the booth playing that type of a rhythm, and everybody folded in with me, and that's how Cold Sweat started.
And Pee Wee's got the horns.
I've been listening to Miles Davis, and So What popped up in my head. So I took the part and just repeated it over and over, and we added a very important guitar part, contrasting all of that to which is funky by itself.
Going, and boom, they knock out Cold Sweat in no time. But Cold Sweat was different. Cold Sweat was James leaving behind his R&B roots and going into a new world that at that time did not have the name of funk. It became known as funk. Nowadays, we instantly recognize it as, yeah, that's funk. It didn't have a name at that time. But what it was a different groove that leaned on patterns, like a bass line. And it was all built around one chord and one bar, with the emphasis on the first beat of that bar. And that's what James called the one. You gotta have it on the one.
Symbol hit me. That's the one. That's the one. I say, oh, I think I understand. Okay, that's it.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
It would be, you hit the one to say we're here, but the two would be the lick that the band, the horns would hit. You
So
know?
the two would be the one.
That's the one.
So when they say everything is on the one,
That means you're right on top of it. You're on top of the beat.
He kind of kept everybody in focus with that, because if you don't know where that one is at, you know, it's like you kind of everywhere. You know, it's just like speaking in tongues. And those who have ears hear, and those that don't get funked up.
You know, you're in 4/4 time. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Da, ba, da, right? But they get these very syncopated rhythms based on that one chord. You got this bass line that repeats. You got a guitar pattern. You know, the chicken scratching kind of chords, or the that kind of thing, right? The horns are doing a vamp, and then James can just play with that on top of that. He's got it. He had the lyrics written out long before, so he's got these. It's a different kind of song structure because he's got these little one-bar blocks, and there's that one is, you know, the main groove of the thing, and then there's another one that James calls the bridge. It's a change, but it's not really a bridge. I mean, a bridge is like what the British call a middle eight. You know, it's called a bridge because it's the bridge between a verse and a chorus. You know, you play the verse, then you play the bridge, and then you go to the chorus, and then you start over again. Or it might be the B section in a Tin Pan Alley song, like Autumn Leaves. You know, it has a form of A, B being the bridge. But for James, the bridge was a change. And sometimes it would just go up to the 4 chord because that was like part of the blues tradition he's coming out of. You listen to Papa's Got a Brand New Bag or I Got You, they're blues changes. They're 1, 4, 5. They've got breaks and they're syncopated, but it's essentially the blues. But then with funk, he's just dealing with these 1 chord things that are extremely funky, and the rhythm is super infectious and syncopated. But if you listen to it on its own, which I will give you the opportunity to do so, it's disciplined, it's tight. It's like, you know, the guys that play this kind of stuff, they talk about being in the pocket and staying in the pocket and not getting out of the pocket. And that just means being in time with the drummer, with everything else. There might be some swing elements to it, but basically it's all locking together and it's interlocking. Because if you know, a lot of times musicians that first start playing funk, they start playing too much and everybody starts subdividing into 16th note patterns and it just turns into a mess and it doesn't work. These guys weren't doing that. They were disciplined, and they stayed in pocket, and they were all good players, and you can hear it on all these tracks. And they're repeating that 1-bar thing. And this became a template for hip hop. You know, besides influencing Prince and Sly Stone and Michael Jackson, James Brown is the most sampled artist of all time. And a lot of hip hop is based on just a 1-bar thing that repeats over and over again. Now, music is, one of the key elements of music is repetition. But it also another key element is change. Because if all you do is just repeat, then it gets boring. So what the bridge was a change from that group. That was like the second building block that he had, and he could go to the bridge, and a lot of the times it would be like the 4-chord, keeping in that blues sensibility, but other times he would just go to, in Cold Sweat, he goes down a whole step, and it goes from D minor to C minor. And it's just a different groove. It's another groove. It's another pattern that they had rehearsed. And then he'd give the signal to go to the bridge, and off they'd go. And some of the live recordings, he plays with when he goes to the bridge, when he comes out of it, if he was super in tune with his audience, because he, playing more nights than not, he got to where he could read the audience, and he knew what was working and what wasn't. And so sometimes he'd go to the bridge and he'd stay on it for 10 minutes, something that's supposed to be 8 bars. A normal guy would be writing out a chart. He'd go, yeah, you do this for 8 bars, then you go back. If it's working, if it's having its effect, because you go on that change, the bridge, and it lifts the energy up, lay into it. So he'd do that. So he had these tight building blocks, like Lego blocks of 1-bar things that he could go back and forth between. And then plus, he could be loose within that structure and improvise. So he can call out, he could bring up a player to do a solo. Mazio Parker come and do a sax solo. Or give the drummer some. First time he gave the drummer some was in Cold Sweat, and that was Clyde Stubblefield.
Let's get a drummer some. All right? Get a drummer some. Get a drummer some. Get some. Drummer. Yo.
And he didn't have to say that. That became part of the act. It was like he had an act. It was like the cape act. Everybody knew the cape act was an act, right? They put the cape over his shoulders and lead him away. But it was great, and it was shamanistic because it was, you feel sanctified watching him. He's testified. He's left everything. He falls down on one knee, because he's just so full of the energy, of the spirit, of his music. But when he does that, when he falls down on one knee, he does it on the one. When he shakes off the cape, he shakes it off on the one. And the whole thing of asking the band, can we go to the bridge? They go, yeah, all right. Can we go to the bridge? Like 4 times. He didn't have to do that because he had a system of signals and just a nod, and if a band player wasn't watching, he'd get fined. He didn't have to do that. That let the audience in on the fun. You feel like you're watching something interactive, and you're watching James direct his band. Can we go to the bridge? Can we hit it? Can we hit it and quit it? Hit it and quit it. And it's just great stuff. And I think that having that elasticity within a rigid structure, because like I said, the individual 1-bar things are tight grooves. They're not, they're not improvising within that. The guitar player is not doing variations of his part the way I would, because I tend to overplay. But they're very disciplined, and they just lean into that, and they make that thing work. And then within that, the outside framework is he can stretch, and he can cut it, go to the next one if it's not working. I mean, he just had his show so that he could tailor it to what was working with any particular audience, any particular night of the week. And that was how it worked, and it was amazing. Take It to the Bridge, that even influenced Led Zeppelin. That got all the way across the pond.
Excuse me, will you excuse me? I'm just trying to find the bridge. Has anybody seen the bridge? Please.
Have you seen the bridge?
I ain't seen the bridge.
Where's that confounded bridge?
It's just great stuff, and I think that the infectious rhythms combined with a the fact that they can be changed up and broken down, and you can give the drummer some and bring on solos. I think that's what made it appeal to jazz artists like Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock, George Duke. They all start playing funk because, people accuse all of them of selling out, but that's nonsense. They did that kind of music because they loved it, because that's what they wanted to play, because that's what they were listening to, and that's what they were influenced by. And funk lends itself very well to jazz. You listen to Miles Davis playing On the Corner, and man, it's great stuff. But James Brown was mighty and awesome. I got to see him live twice. We listened to some clips. It seems almost sacrilege to take his voice out of the mix, but if you do that, it's a lot easier to concentrate on the track and what the musicians are doing. So I'm going to play you some examples of some of his classic funk tunes from this period, and you can hear just the track. And plus, I'll put up full versions of the instrumental tracks of these songs that you can listen to in their entireties, because why not?
Can't stop saying.
Without James Brown, you don't even want to think about without James Brown, because you don't have to, because there was a James Brown, and there is a James Brown. And people are still sampling Funky Drummer and putting it on hip-hop tunes, he affected so many musicians. It's ridiculous. Now, I won't do anything outlandish like say he invented funk. I think funk might have gotten invented somewhere in Africa 800 years ago, but he certainly advanced the form quite a bit and made it accessible to everybody. He was just, God bless James Brown. Should we hit it and quit it? Hit it.